Hi, and welcome to MarylandReporter.com's weekly podcast. I'm Andy Rosen, here with Maryland politics reporter Tom LoBianco and staff writer for MarylandReporter.com, Nick DiMarco. We are going to talk about a few interest groups, how they did. There's a bunch of statements coming out every day. Here's our wrap of the session. And the first one we're going to talk about is the ever-powerful liquor lobby.
Thanks, Andy. In Annapolis, Bruce Bariano is synonymous with the liquor lobby, and he had a stellar year, so I'm sure his clients are very happy. Three bills, or three major topic areas, which some of them we knew weren't going to go anywhere, others seemed like they might go somewhere, and all three of them died just the way he liked it. And the first one being the wine and booze tax. That was guaranteed to go nowhere from the start, even though it got some play. So that no surprise there. The second one is the wine shipping bill. Something that's very popular. Had more. If all the sponsors had a chance to vote on it, it would have passed easily, but they never got a chance to vote on it. It was kicked to a study committee. And the third one was the interlock ignition bill that would have made it tougher for people convicted of DUI and drunk driving offenses. And that died as well.
Nick DiMarco had a big story this week on the successes of the labor movement during the session. Can you give us a couple highlights about what happened and what didn't?
Labor unions had a pretty big year, although a lot of them will downplay their successes. Two pretty major groups actually received collective bargaining rights, the first being teachers. A new law that was passed on Monday sets up a independent, neutral body to broker negotiations between teachers and their respective school boards. Another bill essentially codifies a 2007 executive order that gives childcare providers union rights. But a trend that is starting to loom in Annapolis, and this is coming from business interest groups like the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, are saying that these unions are starting to overreach into the workplace, trying to set up too many rules based on workplace regulation.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Nick highlighted in his story, and something that I didn't feel got a whole lot of attention, Tom had a story about this early in the session, was a bill to give retail workers 15-minute shift breaks. You'd have to do it. I mean, I think employers would say, we'll do it anyway, but now you have to. After every 4 hours of work, you have to work 4 hours consecutive. Our number 3 group that we're going to talk about here is the environmental movement, especially the Environment Maryland advocacy group. They were very upset about a number of perceived injustices, not least of which was the attempt by the legislature to withhold funding from the University of Maryland Law School Environmental Law Clinic over essentially a lawsuit about who put chicken waste on a farm on the Eastern Shore that does business with Purdue. It's very complicated. Eventually, the legislature backed off that. There was some sort of internal division between the environmental groups on a stormwater management bill, which Tom covered at every turn. So maybe tell us a little bit briefly about what happened there.
Well, by the end of it, we had an agreement between the home builders, the counties of Maryland Municipal League over a slightly less strict stormwater regulations than what had originally been drafted by the Maryland Department of the Environment. And what it ended up doing was it caused a split in the environmental community because the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, 1,000 Friends of Maryland, had been involved in the negotiations, and they supported the compromise. But groups which had not been involved in the negotiations, such as the aforementioned Environment Maryland, said they thought it was a travesty. And you also had Paul Pinsky, who was a Senate chairman overseeing this, saying that he would not accept it. So at the end of the day, that was, I would say, a mixed bag for environmentalists.
Adding to environmental causes, the legislature passed a bill that will essentially require the state of Maryland to boost its solar energy capacity by 2% by 2020. Now let's go over to Andy Rosen, who has something to say about county interest groups.
So counties had a lot of pressing concerns, especially as the state looks to balance its budget. The House and Senate had very different budgets, and I think some of the key differences had to do with aid to counties. I mean, the Senate had a budget that really pared back aid on roads that they're sending to counties, and that measure wound up passing mostly the way the Senate had intended it. And over the next couple of years, I think drivers around the state are going to see some impact from that. The other major county thing in the budget was a piece having to do with the pensions for teachers. Some deep negotiations about that, but the House would not accept that. So the state will continue to pay all of that money.
I think the counties dodged a major bullet here with the teacher pensions. This is something that's coming down the pike, but they couldn't escape everything, as we saw with the massive gutting of funding for roads from the states. So this is a bill that will eventually come due, but in an election year was not as bad as it could have been.
And our final issue is something we're going to talk about. It's not really an interest group, but they're interesting anyway. This is a year that incumbent legislators really had to watch their backs, and there was a lot of intrigue in the assembly. And our view here, I think, is that they did okay as incumbents given the electoral map this year, where there's a lot of anti-incumbent feeling. Tom, you had an interesting anecdote about that you wanted to share with us.
Sure. Well, I was at one of the tax day tea parties up in Harford County, and the delegate Rick Impalaria, who is a Harford County and Baltimore County Republican, whose natural base would seem to be in a number of these tax day or the Tea Party folks, told me something very interesting. He will not be putting the term re-elect in Impalaria. He will not be using the term re-elect on his literature, on his signs. In part because of this anti-incumbent attitude. What's funny about that is that it was anti-incumbency is the sort of thing where you think it might be directed more at Democrats, but it appears to be universal.
I think during the session, ultimately, sitting legislators probably did okay. There weren't a lot of hot button social policy issues. There was a debate over Attorney General Gansler's opinion on gay marriage, but the leadership really didn't force their membership to take a whole lot of action on that. There weren't a lot of major budget cuts that people will feel. We were talking about roads earlier. People will notice that down the road, but not right away. I think people will not notice a big difference in state government, at least immediately, out of this session. And I think for the most part, also, they didn't raise taxes. They might later. I mean, who knows? But we'll see. That wraps it up for us here at MarylandReporter.com. Be sure to check back with us every Monday for your weekly podcasts and other excellent multimedia components produced by Nick DiMarco. We've got great content, and go to TomLoBianco.com. He has lots of great stuff, musings about state politics. He contributes to YPR 88.1, and he contributes to Center Maryland, centermaryland.org. Have a nice week.